has decided that he's going to make it a mission to tell people about this journey and about what he experienced and everything that he saw. So without further ado, I would welcome Benjamin Ladra, Swedish citizen, visiting us today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
You can put this on your head. Sure. Like that.
So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here. This is actually my first time speaking in a mosque, so I'm very honored that you would have me here. And so my name is Benjamin Ladra, and I just finished 2 months ago walking from Sweden to Palestine. It was a journey that took 11 months to complete. It was almost 5,000 kilometers through 13 different countries. And I saw and experienced a lot, obviously, on this journey, and I will tell you a bit about it. I will also tell you about my previous journey to Palestine. That was by plane. That was probably the first and last time, because I think the Israeli authorities have banned me from entering, since I'm speaking out against the human rights abuses taking place there. That's also where my interest comes from as a human rights activist. We cannot see the grave injustice that is being inflicted upon the Palestinian people and then stay silent, because we all have morals. So let me jump straight into one of the refugee camps which you can see on the screen. It's one of the world's only Christian refugee camps, they told me, Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. When I was in Lebanon, I visited 10 different camps and met Palestinians that have been living in exile and without rights and in very tough living conditions for 70 years. And as you can see on the picture, the children are playing in a bombed-out schoolyard in Debaye, outside of Beirut. This is another picture from how it looks like from above. There's a little hill right beside it. And you can see on the roofs that it has this corrugated steel. It's not really a roof, because in Lebanon, Palestinians aren't allowed to own property to begin with, and they aren't allowed to expand their camps either, but they have been there for generations, since the ethnic cleansing of Palestine in 47-48. So naturally, families grow, you have kids, and you need to build new rooms and new floors. But they cannot do that, so this is technically, according to Lebanese law, not houses, since they don't have roofs. And these roofs blow off and they leak water. It's very bad living there. And they are also having water problems. And I think this image illustrates another part of the injustice. They shouldn't have to have that. And you see a huge swimming pool just beside them. That's outside the refugee camp. Most camps are very small, just a square kilometer big. This is inside another camp. This is Shatila, also in Beirut. You see the infrastructure is horrible. The electrical wires go everywhere. And sometimes they are right next to the water pipes, which leads to fatal incidents, especially for children who are curious and like to play around. So this was very, very strong to go and visit all these places and see how the people are living there. So I was walking for 11 months, and the reason was to raise awareness about what is going on in Palestine. I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of some of the abuses taking place under the occupation. I was there before, and I read a lot about this topic. I have many friends from Palestine also, so I will tell you in a bit about my journey there and what led me up to this decision, because it was a big decision. It's not something you think of every day, that you're going to go out and be away from your family and from your friends. I quit my job, I quit my studies. I gave up a lot to be able to do this. And I pushed around this baby stroller the entire way. I began with just my backpack on me, but it was very, very heavy. So after a week, someone wrote on Facebook, a brilliant man said, "Why don't you get some wheels to take off the pressure from your back?" I said, "You just saved me a year of pain, of back pain. Thank you for that." So that's actually baby stroller number 4, because they're not really built for walking thousands of kilometers. They break after a little while. So that's another insight. If you ever plan on walking really far, don't get something more robust than one of these, but I did with what I could, with what I had. This was the route through the 13 countries. It took quite a while. I started in August last year and I finished July. And then I got home, and but after being on the road for such a long time and being an activist full time, I couldn't really sit still. So I soon went to Denmark to do a little speaking tour, and then I went to the States, where I've been now for a bit over a week.
Benjamin, so what prompted it? I mean, how was the decision that you suddenly were going to, okay, I'm going to walk to Palestine?
It's a very deep decision, and I will tell you all about it right now. But first I need to take you to Palestine and let you see what I saw and let you hear the stories that I heard, so you can understand my emotions when I took this part, because it was you need to feel some of the injustice when you're there. So I was there last year in April, and I went to a city called Hebron. Have any of you been there in Palestine, in Hebron? Oh, so you will know exactly what I'm talking about. This Palestinian city, with roughly 200,000 people, have an illegal settlement in the heart of the city with around 800 settlers. And it's surrounded by these checkpoints, walls, fences, and soldiers, making a circle around the heart of the city. And they have created an apartheid system within. I could go inside because I'm Swedish, but my Palestinian friends that were with me, those are the guys sitting in the picture, they couldn't come through these gates because they were Palestinian. I could pass through, however, so I'm gonna take you inside. This was one of the first things I saw, some graffiti saying "Fight Ghost Town" and "Open Shahada Street." I didn't know what that was about, so I asked the guide I had with me, and she showed me this street that used to be the main market street where all the transactions were being made, like all the shops were. And as you can see on the picture, it's completely shut down. It's like a ghost town now. All the doors you see on the picture used to be shops, but the Israeli soldiers came and forcefully shut them closed, welding them together, sometimes with Palestinians still inside these shops when they came and closed them, so they had to break windows to escape from their shops, which were forcefully shut. I continued walking in Hebron. That was quite a sight. It shook me a lot seeing that. And then I came to this street, which you see has a fence right in the middle of the street. And this is to separate Israelis from Palestinians. So Israelis on one side and Palestinians on the other. It's complete segregation. And that was very, very shocking to see. And in this mosque, I'm sure you know this mosque, since before the Ibrahimi mosque, there have been massacres, or one massacre in particular by Baruch Goldstein, killing people who were praying. They told me all about that story. It was also very shocking to hear and to see. I continued walking in this city. I came to this house. They told me that settlers a few weeks earlier had broken in, taken all the furniture outside, put them in a big pile, poured gasoline on them, and torched all these things that this Palestinian family owned. The family was away for vacation, and when they came back, they saw their house empty and their furniture burned. You can still see some of the ash on the ground. Now the family doesn't dare to live there anymore, because the Palestinians that are still living in this now occupied city center, some of them have put up these kinds of fences outside their windows to protect themselves, because they are routinely and continuously harassed by the settlers living there. And there's roughly 2,000 soldiers there protecting these settlers. Their job is to make sure that these settlers are safe. So when settlers attack Palestinians, the soldiers aren't there to hold them accountable. They cannot do that. It's not their job. It's not their mission. The best they can do is try to end the fight, or even when the settlers are instigating it. But it was really a lot to see all of this and take it in. It was one of the craziest places I've been in my life. Here is a soldier walking around, and if you want the Israeli reason for closing down these shops, they put up a little sign saying it was for security reasons. Well, a lot of things in this place seem to happen for security reasons. Like, you know, there's a blockade on Gaza, a military blockade. At one point, they didn't allow chocolate to enter, or diapers, or potato chips for security reasons. So then I went back home. This is my city. This is Gothenburg in Sweden. This is where I live. And, you know, it's quite different from being in Palestine. It's quite different than America, too. Sweden is a very nice place. We have our rights. We have democracy, freedom of speech. We have free healthcare. We get paid for going to university. We don't pay for it. And I just got back home, and I sat at my kitchen table. I put on a song that was singing about Palestine, and I just broke down. I just started crying. It was too much. How can I bear all of this injustice that I witnessed? Every single person I met were talking about how they had had children arrested, how some family member had been killed, how they had had their house demolished. Just story after story with every Palestinian I met when I was there. And I thought I was prepared for this. I thought I knew. I had read so much before going. I had plenty of friends, which were the ones that sparked my interest in this place to begin with. Friends from the Yarmouk refugee camp in Syria, which is now destroyed, that had fled to Sweden because of the war in Syria. Palestinians, now refugees from Palestine to Syria, now refugees again from Syria to Sweden, in my age. They were the ones introducing me, and they told me a lot about this, but nothing will prepare you for reality when you see it with your own eyes, when you hear it, when you smell it, when you feel it. There is a 10-meter high wall there surrounding all of the West Bank, and when you see this, it's not on the picture, but when you see it, then you feel it and you understand more. So when I got home, I had read a lot before, but I continued to read, and I thought I would read to you some Israeli soldiers' testimonies, one testimony in particular, because there is a lot to read, and the reality is out there for everyone to see, and I think this book in particular is very good to have read through. It's 300 testimonies collected by an organization called Breaking the Silence, and they're an organization by Israeli soldiers who are collecting testimonies from other soldiers who are speaking out against what they have done under the occupation, all the things they were doing on a daily basis. So I will just read a short little paragraph from it. Testimony number 30, saying that we only killed 4 children. So this organization goes around and do interviews. So there are 2 people, one interviewer and one soldier. And the soldier, who was in Nablus at the time, said that we were based at the regional brigade, and we'd go into the city each time into Nablus for ambushes. The interviewer asks, when you say each time, you mean something like 4 or 5 times a week. Arrests, straw widows, diversion tactics. So how many kills did your company have? 11 armed, I think, and something like 4 or 5 children. 4 or 5 children? At some point, they told us that since we'd only taken down 4 kids, they were going to give our company missions because we were known for not hitting civilians. So who told you that? The company commander said it was the brigade commander. We were given certain jobs because we knew how to be selective, and we didn't harm innocent people. And these were only 4 children. Only 4 children. And it continues, I won't read all of it. Here's 3 other headlines from 3 other testimonies. One saying, how can you impose so many curfews and expect people to live? Or a patrol to beat up Arabs. Or we go into the homes of innocent people every day, all the time. Now, I'm bearing with me all of these stories. I read through this entire book and many, many other books and human rights reports. I was in Palestine. I saw all of this with my own eyes. And most people, as you know, will never hear these stories. They won't be shown in the media. They won't be taught in the education system. And unless you're privileged enough to meet the wonderful people from Palestine that can share these stories with you, or other people that also know, there's a high probability that these stories would never come out. And it's very important that we know what is happening, because without knowledge of problems, then how can we solve problems? If we don't know about injustice, then how can we solve and work towards ending that injustice? Knowledge is power. And the more we know, the higher the likelihood of us having an idea to work towards progress will become, I believe. So on my journey, I came to Istanbul, and in Istanbul I was invited to a peace conference to receive a little peace award. It was very strange, I thought.
Make the mic a little bit closer so you can,
Like this?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
now it's really quite loud. So, as I was saying, when I was in Istanbul at a peace conference, I met these two amazing people. They are the family of Mohammed Abu Khader, which was a 17-year-old boy who was kidnapped by Israeli settlers as a revenge killing. Settlers were roaming and looked for an Arab to kill. They found their son. He was 17, on his way back from school. They took him in his car and drove him to the woods, beat him up, and torched him. Now, I had read about that before, but it was really emotional meeting the family, and I can't understand how they could still smile and laugh after something like this had happened. His 15-year-old cousin was also beaten up, and he was an American. He is an American citizen. He lives in Tampa, Florida. He was there to visit his family. They live in Jerusalem. He was beaten up by the Israeli police. There's a horrible video, I won't show you it, that shows their beating. And it was really emotional meeting them, and also meeting the Dawabsha. I didn't meet these people, but knowing the story of the Dawabsha family, which I heard when I was in Palestine, they had their house burned as there is a concept called price tag killings, which is really awful. It is when settlers take revenge on Palestinians for something the Israeli state does against the settlers. So there's a lot of settlers building illegal settlements, sometimes, really not often, sometimes in a few exceptional cases, the Israeli state takes some measures to dismantle these settlements, at least in the early stages. Usually they do not, but sometimes they do. And then the settlers get very angry, and they carry out price tag attacks, they call them, against Palestinians, even though they are unrelated. So this boy is the sole survivor of his family, or he was orphaned when they torched his house as a price tag attack. The settlers are still taunting to finish the job outside his house. So I had to explain to you all of these stories before I could answer your question, why walk to Palestine? Because it's not something you can explain if you don't first know some of the stories from Palestine and some of the stories that I feel need to be shared and to get out, because the injustice is too much to bear. I'm just a simple person. I cannot bear all of this without doing anything. I cannot just go back to work and shut off, pretend like I don't know, and continue on with business as normal. Because I believe that change happens when pressure is put. Without pressure, things stand still. But when we mount pressure, then we see change. And that happens in both directions, both positive and negative. So by walking, I figured I will raise the awareness. I will share new stories with people that haven't heard these stories before. Hopefully they will also feel what I feel, that there is injustice here and the injustice needs to end. Everyone needs to be treated equally. And when enough people feel that and act upon that feeling also, not just keep it to themselves, but do things, then I think things will change. And walking, by the virtue of it being very difficult, it gains some attention. I figured by doing a project like this, some people will notice what I'm doing. Otherwise, I'm just me sitting in my kitchen table in Gothenburg, trying to reach out to people. But how do we reach out to people? How do we make people listen to the stories we are carrying with us, whether it's from Palestine or from other places? Well, unfortunately, we usually have to do something unusual, maybe extraordinary, creative at least, to break through all the noise and the media buzz that surrounds us every day. It's really difficult to get people's attention to these stories, especially in the United States, I believe. So I had many guests on my walk, some some uninvited in my shoes. I slept under this bridge in Germany. It had been raining for 2 weeks. I was soaking wet. And you can imagine my desperation when this place actually seemed inviting and it seemed like dry and a good place to stay the night. It's not, but I was out of options. My tent was wet. This is an abandoned house in Turkey. And I got to overcome, or I had to overcome, a lot of my fears on this journey. It's not like you can... It's not like I don't also have fear and anxiety. I think everyone does. And it's not like I enjoy sleeping in abandoned houses and under bridges and in more difficult places as well. But when you put yourself in situations that are a bit extreme, then you can... Outside your comfort zone is when you grow and you overcome these things. And I grew a lot on this journey. My tent broke several times. I had never set up a tent before in my life. The first time was in the tent store where I asked the guy selling tents, I just want a tent that will keep me dry, that will keep me going for a year. He sold me this shit because it broke several times. The only job it had was to stay whole and keep me warm. This little stick was supposed to be round, but it kept breaking. I've slept on fields in mud. All the things I've carried with me have been dirty. This tent kept on breaking. There was a lot of hardships. And you're alone when you do things like this. It's not like you can call anyone to help you in a little... If you're in a village in Bulgaria or if you're in a mountain in Serbia, there's not many people around. And the few that may be around, you don't really know them. Don't get a baby stroller, they also break. And when this happens, when the wheel falls off, then you have to stand on the point where the wheel fell off. And it's very uncomfortable, and you have to walk very slowly to the next city. This was around 20 kilometers outside of Prague in the Czech Republic. So that was not the most comfortable entry into Prague, walking like this. My back hurt a lot when I finally got there. Yeah, because it fell off and I couldn't get it back because this is supposed to be straight and it was not. And then winter came also. Walking for a year, I figured I can't avoid it, but if I start in the summer, at least I only have one winter. If I start in winter, I will have 2 winters. I don't want that. So I started in summer. You can see the little baby stroller has 2 different colors on the wheels also, because sometimes I could fix the wheel, but sometimes I could not. One point in Bulgaria, I had to spend the night in the snow also. This was my new tent, because the last one broke for good in Austria. But good things happen. When I was in Austria, I met another man that was also walking very much, if you can believe that. He had walked from Graz in Austria to Oman, south of Saudi Arabia. That's a really long way. So we had a lot to talk about, long distance walking. And I think I mentioned my tent was broken, and he said, "Oh, I have several, do you want one?" That's, yes, please. So he gave me this one, which was amazing, which I still have with me. It's a really good one. He's now actually walking from Norway to South Africa, which is, it takes roughly 3 years, he estimates. So people do things, but he doesn't have a popular social media account. Come and ask me after, I will show you who he is. He's really great. And then the police started coming also. They actually started coming in Sweden. I have met police from every country. At some point I felt I was meeting more police than normal people. This was the first encounter. I asked him to take a picture of me with a car. Yes, we don't know. Why are the police coming? I think for several reasons. Maybe they think I'm a refugee when I'm walking. Maybe they get suspicious because I'm carrying a huge flag when I'm walking. Maybe someone sees me and gets suspicious for one of those two reasons. But let me tell you, if you think someone is a refugee, the first thing you do is go there and ask if they need anything, if they need help. The last thing you do is call the police. But I got in the habit of taking sneaky pictures of the police when they showed up, because they showed up so much. Some police were amazing, not these guys, but one officer in Croatia, I was really inspired by him, because he had gone to Turkey, and he had seen people leaving the shores towards Greece. He had seen people really suffering and being just miserable. He had seen the crisis for refugees, and he had a lot of compassion for them. And he had taken people into his home even though that's forbidden for a police officer. And yeah, he really touched me. He said that more police should go and see reality, because he said most people in Croatia, in the police force, have never seen where these people are coming from. They don't understand what they have gone through. And they have to quickly explain to their senior officer, someone back at the station, about the situation, which they only saw for 5-10 seconds if they see someone on the road, and then they get an order back, and then they have to follow that order, even if that order is not very good. So it has a lot, he told me, to do with the way they explain what they are seeing, the way that officer interprets it at the station, and then an order comes back. And he told me that this is a big reason why there is not very good handling of refugees in his place, as to his experience. The one thing I took with me was that more people should go and see reality to understand. These police on the picture, though, is a quite different story. A lot of things happened in Turkey when I was in Turkey. I was in Turkey for about 3 months. It's a huge country. I walked 1,000 kilometers inside Turkey. It's very big. And at this particular point, I was with the 2 friends. Sometimes people would join me for parts of the walk. And the guy with the kofia on his head joined me for 3 weeks. We became very good friends. And we were doing an interview with the daily Hürriyet in Turkey, one of their biggest newspapers. So we had a whole media team there, and we were talking. And then the police shows up, and they don't arrest us, but they take us all, us and the reporters and everyone, and it drives us to another place. You can see 3 cars on the picture. All 3 of them were full of officers. The blue one is the military police, the one to the right of me, right of you also, is normal police, and then there's the security services on the left. They don't know the flag. That's why we're holding it like this, because they're asking us to hold up the flag so they can take a picture to send to the police station so they can figure out what country it is. We're like, it's, yeah. We said, it's Palestine, guys, come on. We're like, I can Google it right now. It's really easy. You don't have to take a picture and send it somewhere. The reason I have this picture is because I realized this is quite a good picture. So I take my phone, I give it to one of the media people, say, take a picture of us, because it's the police taking pictures, and they won't give me. So this was from one of the reporters taking a picture. And then further down the road in Turkey, after maybe 2 months towards the end, I'm outside of Konya, and another routine thing happening. I'm thinking, I see a police down the road, he's waving at me. I figure, okay, he wants to search my stuff, he wants to see my papers as usual. But when I approach him, he asks, are you the guy walking? I'm like, yeah, obviously, but yeah. And he says, oh, I saw you on TV. Are you hungry? Want some lunch? I'm like, what? What's happening? The police are offering me lunch? That was the first, because usually they just want to search my stuff. And while we're sitting and eating, he's writing this little note, and at the end of our meal, he says that they're Muslim in Turkey. So he says that this is a prayer that I want you to take to the Palestinian people. I was very touched by this. He translated it to me. It said something along the lines with that we, the Turkish people, will stand with the Palestinian people forever. You're not alone in your struggle. We know your suffering and your pain, and we are with you. So, obviously I didn't make it into Palestine and was able to give this to the Palestinians, but for all the Palestinians in this room today, know that this man said that to you. And I was very moved by this. So I think this girl conceptualizes a lot of the absurdities and the injustices happening in Palestine. Do you know who she is? Have you seen her before? Ahed Tamimi, yes.
Her the day after she came out.
Wow, we have to talk about that later. So she was 16 years old when she slapped an Israeli soldier on her property right outside her home. It takes a lot of courage to do something like that. But an hour earlier, they had shot her, I think he was 15 years old, her cousin, in the head with a rubber bullet. But no, when you read that someone gets shot by a rubber bullet in the media, that these bullets are steel bullets with a thin layer of rubber around them. And if you get shot, you're lucky to survive. He survived, but he looks like this after surgery. Just 1 hour after, they come back to her property, the soldiers, and she gives one of them a slap. And I have a little video I will show you with that slap in case you haven't seen it. And one of the Israeli politicians' responses when being asked about this incident by the BBC. So let's see if we can play that for you. I'm not sure if we have sound, but we don't need it because we have subtitles. You see her now. That was a slap.
My name is Oren Chazan. I'm the youngest member of the Knesset, actually member of the Israeli parliament.
When you saw that video of her slapping the soldier, what went through your mind?
If I was there, she would finish in the hospital, for sure. Nobody could stop me. I would kick her face. If you will act with terror, we have the right to go inside your houses and terminate terror.
A slap isn't terrorism.
No, a slap is terrorism, believe me. A slap is a terrorism.
I don't know if I should laugh at this or not. It's so absurd, you want to laugh, but at the same time, this man sits in the Israeli parliament, has influence, and is a policymaker. It's quite absurd. But I guess you know in in America what it's like to have someone in parliament or a president that says outrageous things all the time. He's just one of the examples of some politicians I will show you and what they have been saying. It's really quite absurd. So after this slap, just a slap, she's arrested from her home in the middle of the night by fully armed soldiers. And this is what they do all the time when they arrest Palestinians, and they arrest Palestinians all the time. As you could see in the soldiers' testimony, we go into innocent people's houses every day, all the time. You can read all about the confessions in this book. I really recommend you to get it. So they came into the Tamimi family's house also in the middle of the night, fully armed soldiers, and took this 16-year-old girl away. And then some footage leaked from her interrogation. So they interrogate children without a lawyer present, without a parent, in violation of the 4th Geneva Convention, because they take them outside of Palestine into Israel. And there are organizations monitoring all the abuse taking place under these interrogations, and in prisons they conduct interviews with the children. Most of them report sleep deprivation, having their hands tied so hard that they get damage, threats during the interrogation. And you will see that now in this leaked video from the interrogation with Ahed, that they are threatening to arrest her family and her friends if she doesn't cooperate. And remember, she's only 16, and they do this to children as young as 12.
النور، تعرفي مروان، تعرفي أسامة، تعرفي مرح، تعرفي أنت تعرفي كله. ياخذ كل المكان إذا بدك تستعنف يخرب للهاي. هيك وهيك بالإيدك. بالإيدك. أنت بتعرفي مروان، بتعرفي محمود. لا، قوم احكي معنا. بدكش؟ حبيبي.
So the names he is reading out is her relatives, her family, and her brother, her friends. And by cooperation, the soldiers interviewing, or the interrogators, whatever their title may be, they usually mean to sign a document in Hebrew, a language which most Palestinian children do not speak. And under very intense and aggressive interrogations like this, often with threats that you will never get out unless you sign this, some document they don't understand, which usually is a confession of something like I threw a stone or some crime they may or may not have committed. And then they use that confession as evidence in their military court system, because Palestinians live under a different rule of law than Israelis. Palestinians live under military occupation, and this meaning living under martial law, under military law. So when the soldiers arrest Palestinians, they take them to military courts, and these courts have a conviction rate of over 99%. 99.74 last time I checked. And now after this incident, Ahed got 8 months in jail. Her mother was also put in jail. Her mother's crime, according to Israel, was that she filmed this slap. So now she is banned from traveling. They recently, this was a few days ago, they banned this girl, she's now 17, from traveling anywhere because she's making some impact. Currently, 270 children are imprisoned in Israeli prisons. 446, this is numbers from last month, I took from an organization that's called Adamir, and they are monitoring Palestinian prisoners. Administrative detention is the practice of arresting someone, throwing them into jail without a trial, on secret evidence on an indefinite time period. It's completely illegal under international law and routine practice by the Israeli army against Palestinians. And speaking of justice, this is the Israeli Justice Minister, Ayelet Shaked, who clearly shows her view in a Facebook post she shared, where she says that this is a war between two people. Who is the enemy? The Palestinian people. She also increased the punishment of throwing a stone to up to 20 years in jail for throwing a stone. She has also shared another Facebook post calling for the genocide of the Palestinian people, pretty much. She wrote that they are all enemy combatants, the Palestinian people. Now this includes also the mothers of the martyrs who send them to hell with flowers and kisses. They should follow their sons, nothing would be more just. They should go, as should the physical homes in which they raised the snakes. Otherwise, more little snakes will be raised there. It's a Facebook post she shared calling for the killing of Palestinian mothers and the destruction of their homes. And she's also introducing new legislation against incitement, against hate speech, especially online. If you can imagine that irony. We all know who she means. This is another story from the injustice emanating from this place. This man is called Elor Azaria. He was caught on tape executing a Palestinian man on the ground, filmed. And you can see him very happy, smiling. He was very celebrated throughout Israel. He got 9 months in jail for this, executing a man. The girl that was 16 that slapped a soldier got 8 months in jail. When he was in the court, there was huge demonstrations in Tel Aviv saying that we have to release him. He's our boy, he's our son, he's our soldier, he's innocent, He's a hero even. Free the brave and loyal soldier. There were protests against the court against him, and he was even named Man of the Year in an influential Israeli magazine. His virtue having executed a man on tape. And I want to talk a little bit about Gaza also, obviously. There have been demonstrations since the end of March. Every single Friday have there been demonstrations against all of this, because 70% of the people in Gaza are refugees since 47 and 48, where they were ethnically cleansed from their home. Gaza is one of the most densely populated areas on Earth. I lived in Tokyo for 1 year. In Japan, it was very crowded. There's people everywhere. Gaza is more crowded than this, people per square meter. And in this context of having huge population, a very tiny area, from the border to the other border, the long way, you know how it's shaped. It's narrow and it's long. It's only 40 kilometers. And me, being very good with walking right now, I can tell you that takes 8 hours to walk, if you walk. If you run, it's even faster. Car, it's nothing. And this is their open-air prison that they are living in, under military blockade for over a decade, with malnutrition, without economy, without electricity, without food, without water, without future and hope, without dignity. So naturally they are protesting, but they are met with violence. And Israel's defense minister said this about the people in Gaza, that there are no innocents in Gaza, the current defense minister. So when people are out every Friday to try and demand their rights, the rights to return to their ancestral homeland, the rights to have their military occupation lifted, they are met with tear gas, they are met with bullets. Israel just developed a drone dropping tear gas. I think they've sold it to the United States now, probably. They are shooting with live bullets from snipers, journalists. This man without legs was shot. And when you read in the media that there is a clash, or there's a violent riot or a demonstration and someone got shot in this violent happening, and then you see this man, you had to ask yourself the question, what possible threat he could have been to the soldiers on the other side. And medics are also targeted, of course. This girl is Razan al-Najjar, 21 years old, saying that women have to be on the front lines to defend her people, saying that women are stronger than any man. I like her a lot. She's really on the front lines for women's rights also. She was shot in the neck by the Israeli soldiers, who are targeting people demonstrating every single Friday. Over 170 people killed so far, almost 19,000 injured. So it's because of all these stories that I chose to make the journey that I did. And it's because the journey was hard that it got any attention. And it was because I got some attention that I can be here with you today, speaking and sharing these stories. Because what I believe is that when we take action, when we act, when we don't only speak and talk like most politicians do, when we choose to speak out and manifest our voices into action, when we mobilize, then we see results, then the world will move. This is a picture from the suffragette movement, which was at the front lines of demanding the women's rights to vote. As you know, in the early 1900s, women weren't allowed to vote. And these women weren't given this right. Rights are not given. Rights are always won. And they are won by mobilizing. Here in the States, you had the civil rights movement. You had a lot of racism before. You have a lot of racism now. But the civil rights movement at least ended things like the Jim Crow system, the segregated cafes, blacks only or whites only. You have that in Palestine now, Jews only and no Palestinians, roads where Palestinians can't drive, Palestinians can't own shops in areas, Palestinians can't build houses. Well, you had that with blacks here in your own system, in your own way. But by the civil rights movement, you managed to at least improve, even though there is still a lot of racism. And if you believe that you cannot make change as an individual, then look at this boy. His name is Joshua Wong from Hong Kong. He is only 14 years old, and when China decided to impose their curriculum on Hong Kong, he decided that he's not going to stand for it. He organized his friends who were teenagers, he was his age, 15-year-olds, 14-year-olds, and they started organizing, and they were out on the streets every single day handing flyers, taking action, and eventually they managed to mobilize the biggest movement in Hong Kong's history, over 100,000 people, starting with this boy not giving up and not just accepting an injustice, but standing his ground and trying to push for things to be different. He was the leader of this umbrella movement in Hong Kong. And this was China, and this was a 14-year-old boy. So whatever injustice there is, this is the general formula, I believe. It's always action, it's always mobilizing, it's always speaking out. And by me doing this journey, I had the opportunity, the pleasure, the honor of being able to reach a lot of people in a lot of universities, campuses, all of you here today, people in schools, people on the street. I've been speaking to many people and sharing these stories. And I believe once we start doing this together, when we stand together against injustice, wherever it may appear, I know you have so many problems here in the United States. And when we speak out, and when we do things together, then we will see change. The United States government is giving Israel $38 billion in military assistance over a period of 10 years. That translates to $10 million a day to the military of Israel. I think you have a lot of issues here. I think you have a lot of student debt. I think you can improve your health care. You have a housing problem and homeless people. And how can you see a man on the street without a home, and while you are giving millions of dollars to another country's military? That doesn't make sense to me. And if that's ever going to change, then it's going to require all of us. Because I care about you as well. I care about people. I'm a human rights activist. That means I just care. And for the people I met in the refugee camp, these children, if they are ever going to stop being refugees one day, then they need us. Because people aren't standing for them. And they need more people to stand for their rights, to see them as humans, and to take action for their future.
Benjamin, I think it's good to open up right here for a question and answer, because we've got just a few more minutes left.
Let me finish. It's the last slide.
Okay, one more minute.
So this is the human rights diploma I received at the end of my journey, when I was interrogated for 6 hours and not being allowed into Israel. The reason for me not being allowed inside was because I am speaking out. Taking action, of course, means that there is consequences. Like, for me, I'm banned from Palestine and Israel now. But it's all worth it, because I think I'm making some sort of difference and some sort of change. And once we start doing that together, then we can change the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have about 10 minutes for question and answer. And if you allow me, I want to just start us off with a quick question. In the countries that you visited, when you told people about your trip, what was maybe one or two of the most striking reactions that you got, maybe in Europe as well as in the Middle East?
First things that comes to mind is when I do a little speaking event at a hostel in Slovenia, and there's not so many people. We're like 5 people. We're sitting at a table like this, and I'm talking like I'm talking to you now. I'm showing some pictures from my stay in Palestine, and after a while, the people I'm talking to, I see tears in their eyes, and after a while, they just break down because they had no idea about the injustice there. And for me, sometimes I speak about this so much, and it strikes me from time to time, but it becomes a bit normalized, which isn't good. I try to remind myself that I'm speaking about reality, and sometimes I also break down. And I just realize at that moment, like, yeah, if you never heard any of this before, it must be so shocking. And people really don't know, and it must be overwhelming for so many people to see some of the ugly truths of our planet.
I'm going to ask our sisters first if they have a question. Yes. Sister Fazia. So the question that Sister Fazia asked was, we have a lot of Jewish congregations that consider themselves interfaith partners. Will you, Benjamin, be reaching out to some of those Jewish organizations on your trip here?
Yes, of course. This is not a religious conflict at all, and the more allies we have, the better. I am already have several speaking events with Jewish Voice for Peace, and I think that the Jewish voice in general is one of the strongest in supporting the human rights for all persons involved living in Palestine and Israel, because they have a special place when they are speaking, because Israel likes to portray themselves as carrying the voice of a religion, while people that stop to think for a moment know that there is no nation on the planet carrying the voice of any religion. So they just try to play that game, and when the Jewish people are speaking out against that, it's very powerful. So of course I will be reaching out to everyone.
We had a question in the back, Brother Amoudi.
Benjamin, thank you for coming. I hope all of us are young here and will join you in 10 years for another trip. But I hope that all of us will do what Saif did and go and see for ourselves. It's really a good opportunity for us to see somebody who has no relation to this, who is calling us to go. And I'm sure a lot of people there told him that and asked him if he would tell us to go and visit our people in Palestine. My question, or two, are you going to visit your embassy here and talk to them about this, number one? Can you, in another visit, take a group from this community to go and visit your embassy with you? And if you are going into other cities, go also to the Swedish consulate there. Thank you very much. And I hope whenever we get liberated there, we'll give you an honorary citizenship in Palestine.
Inshallah.
Right, so I think I am going to pay the Swedish embassy a visit. I visited many embassies from different countries on my road, and something I learned is that most of them just, their job is to carry their nation's foreign policy. And since Sweden has recognized Palestine, maybe they will help me out with some things. I'm not sure. I guess I'll see. I'll make a call and see if they want to meet me. If they want to meet me, I will try to get some support. Maybe they have journalist contacts, can reach out to the media. I don't think they can arrange any speaking event because people consider me a controversial character, I think. And they can't take a political stance, even though I am not. I am just speaking from a human rights perspective, but in other people's eyes that might be considered political.
We had another question here.
Let me just show you, if you want to see what I've been doing and I'm gonna do in the future, I will leave this picture here with just my social media and 2 links down below if you want to help out also, so you can just write it on your phones if you feel like it.
The logistics. What were the basic logistics?
Yeah, so Google Maps was very helpful in finding my way. Power banks was very helpful in keeping my phone alive. I had 5 power banks with me. You know, I just bought food like normal people do in supermarkets. I stopped at cafes, and you really have to plan it out. And I like to improvise a lot, and sometimes I fail with my planning. So there were periods when I was a bit hungry because I planned too bad. But another experience taught me, because I was organizing a hunger strike in solidarity with the Palestinians before this. So I went days without food. So I know, and you all know because you fast, that we can handle being hungry. It's more of a mental thing. So I had that. As long as I don't give up mentally, I can continue to push it, even though I sometimes fail with the planning for the food and water.
Do we have any other sister questions before I go to more brothers?
Benjamin, thank you for coming. Thank you for talking to us. Thank you for being an inspiration, I guess. My question is, like on the really tough days, when it was like raining outside, you went through some European countries that I know are freezing. Like on the worst days, what kept you going? Because it's like cool in theory. Hey, I'm gonna walk. I'm gonna be an activist. Because a lot of us, we give that stuff lip service. Oh, I tweet I protest, but like walking and like the feet hurting, the blisters, the cold, the rain, like on the worst day, how did you keep going?
So there's
Great question.
yeah, there's a lot of things to that. But another deep reason for me setting out on this journey to begin with is the deep realization that the world does move with pressure. And even though I just tell you these words, when I felt that I understood the meaning of that, there wasn't really any other alternative, because I know that other things will not feel meaningful to do. And I left most of the things behind in Sweden. I quit my job, I quit my studies. I didn't really have anything to go back to, and I didn't want to go back to anything either, because I wanted to see if I could make something positive happen. Because why are we alive in the first place? I'm not religious, I need to create my own meaning sometimes. And this felt meaningful. So that kept me going, even though it was very difficult, not because it felt like the right thing to do. And I was very happy to have something that felt right.
Yes. So
Yeah.
the question is, the question is how usually the Israel is very good about blocking media or messaging that is counter to what they like to give out. So how did you, Benjamin, how were you able to get your information out, your story out, without it being blocked?
Yeah, you're completely right. Now they have passed a law making it forbidden to take photos of soldiers, for example, and to film soldiers, basically banning journalism. But they're not all powerful, you know. They don't control the world, as sometimes people like to put it. I mean, they do have considerable influence, but I keep posting my things on social media. I keep trying to make speaking events. Sometimes they use their influence to make it difficult, and maybe some of the no's I get when I reach out to try and talk is due to their influence. But they're not all powerful, because I do get a lot of yeses also. So yeah, it's because their power is limited, I guess. If it was omnipotent, I couldn't sit here with you, right?
So we have a question here, Safuri.
My question is that you had this goal that you wanted to go to Palestine. So how did you prepare yourself, like physically and mentally, and like the obstacles you faced, like diseases, physical injuries? Were you afraid of these things that will hold you back from your goal?
Right. So he's wondering how I prepared. I didn't prepare physically at all. I just started walking, and you could see a picture of my feet. They got pretty messed up after a while. But I think like this, that if you just have the will, then you are unstoppable. I thought, like, as long as I don't die, I will keep going. And if I die, then that's the end of it anyway, so nothing to worry about.
So we have a question, Ibrahim.
Thank you for coming. I definitely would love to hear more about the other refugees that you met along the way, going in the opposite direction into Europe.
Yeah. So I will tell you a sad story about that, is that I only met one person on this entire road, because Europe has put up like fortresses and there's police everywhere. The police came to me every single day, even in the night when I was sleeping in my tent, police would show up. So if there were people, I know there are, they get taken by the police very fast and you don't see them on the roads anymore. And there's checkpoints on the borders to the EU. Serbia has big borders and checkpoints, and there is police everywhere. So the sad reality is that I didn't see refugees almost at all.
Okay, I'm going to see if our sisters, no other questions from the sisters? Yes. Is your book for sale?
It's not my book, or I guess it is because I bought it. I only have one copy. It's called Our Harsh Logic, by Breaking the Silence. Breaking the Silence is the organization, and or I guess you can't find it in bookshops because we're in the US, but I'm sure you can find it online somewhere, on Amazon, for example.
Probably, yeah.
And you can order it there, Our Harsh Logic by Breaking the Silence. Write to me on my social media if you get the name and just ask for it. I will send a link to you.
We will take one last question because then we have to go to Salah and wrap up and go to Salah. Yes.
Thank you so much for being an inspiration to me personally. I wanted to ask, what is something that, like, speaking just of myself, something that, you know, that I can do to be a leader and, like, you know, follow in the footsteps of, you know, just not someone like you, but in showing support or trying to take action. So what's something that I can do to take effective action or someone else can follow?
Yeah, I think it's always good to lead by example and to do things. So the question what to do comes to mind, right? And there's a million things to do, and but we are limited by our imagination, and I don't have all the ideas. And when I'm out of ideas, I go to the books and I start to read. And what I read is I read about activism. Very few people does this. Read about how other social movements, what they have done, what have worked, even more importantly, what have failed, so you don't repeat past mistakes. Get engaged. Surround yourself by people that are already active. Join other initiatives. Join things that are happening. When you feel like you want to stay at home and chill for the night, but you see that there's something happening, just get out of the couch and go and be there. Connect and network. Create a huge network of people so that the next time you want to do something, you have a project, you have a lot of people and friends to reach out to. Networks are extremely important. And while on this journey of doing actions and being an activist and being a leader and doing things, then you will learn about how doing things work. Your first project will not be your best project. And we need to start doing things to learn what things are working well and not. This decision I came to was after a long time of activism and a lot of failures. This isn't a success or a failure, it's just a project and you learn from every project. The most important tip is to just not be afraid of your idea, whatever it might be, and just try it out. Because that's where most people don't do anything. They are scared of taking that first step and see their project through, whatever it may be.
And there are a lot of resources out there. I mean, one of the things that we have to realize as Muslims is the message of Muhammad ﷺ was a revolutionary message for his society, right? It was a complete change from a patriarchal, tribal, bourgeois society to a society that made the rich and the poor equal, that made the races equal, that made men and women equal. I mean, so it's a message, right? You read for it. You got Marcus Garvey here in the US that wrote a lot about revolution. Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz. So there's a lot to read out there that you can do so. I want to thank our guest, Benjamin, for joining us and being with us this evening. Can we give him a round of applause? And we can also add a takbir to that.
Would you come and take a picture? Because I need something for the Facebook today.
All right. So maybe if you want, you could take a picture with the whole crowd.
Yes, if you want that, I would love it. Can we take a group picture? And for anyone not wanting to be in it.
So brothers and sisters, he wants to take a picture of the crowd. If you don't mind just gathering in the back, and we can take a group picture together. But thank you very much for joining us this evening. We'll take a picture, and then inshallah we'll get ready for our Isha prayers. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك